Hi, this is Michael Waitse, and welcome to MPC's PM Talks. Today, we are honored to be joined, I can see you now, Eric, by Eric Byron, an Agile coach at the Myanmar Project Management Center. Eric, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Michael?
I'm feeling very short. Can we get a bit of your background for context?
Sure. I'm an American, so grew up in the U.S. East Coast, and I really started my professional career at Walt Disney World.
Oh, wow.
I was in Disney Entertainment actually for about 7 years in entertainment, and then I crossed over into IT there. So it was kind of an interesting transition, career change from entertainment to IT. But I was just kind of in the right place at the right time, learning local area networking and infrastructure stuff, actually to support entertainment, and then got sucked into the larger corporate IT group at Disney. But it was a great change for me, really good, just suited me. I took a natural, thing to the tech. And then, I did that for, a number of years there. Then I went on, worked in education publishing. It was there actually that I moved up from, engineering and system architecture into project management. And but that was pretty much traditional project management. We were doing large infrastructure stuff, global. It was a multi-billion-dollar global company, enterprise, and so large system stuff we were planning and executing across the globe.
Okay.
Then I ended up in the video game industry, so which was just an absolute blast. I came into the industry on the IT side, actually hired by Electronic Arts as the IT manager for one of the studios there in Florida, actually. And then I crossed over from traditional IT operations to game development as a development manager and then development director making video games. So, and it was at EA that I learned Agile. So I helped them with the transition from traditional project management to Agile.
And what was the impetus for you? In other words, what was your real introduction to Agile project management? And what was sort of the epiphany for you where you said, wait a second, we've been doing stuff, we've been really successful, but maybe we could have actually been more successful. Maybe we could have actually used the resources, the human resources that we had even better if we understood how to do this in the Agile way. And then maybe you could give a discussion of what Agile is as well, right? For people that may not be
familiar. So, of course, at the time, we didn't even really call it Agile transformation, right? We were just trying to figure out a better way to make video games. Right. But I think the key component there, the thing that we were really trying to solve, and hopefully I won't get in trouble with EA for talking about some of this, but so we made the American football games, right? So this was EA Sports, right? And we made Madden football there in Orlando, and I was on the NCAA football game development team. So, but we had thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, nearly 20,000 defects every cycle of the game.
What does that mean, though? What's a defect?
It's a bug, right? Okay. Something the software is doing that it shouldn't do, right?
It's not working.
So these were year-long cycles, right? So we had, you think about it, right? It goes with the NFL season for Madden football, right? So once a year you're going to release the game. So these were really big 1 year, hundreds of people, big projects. But we were thrashing. It was painful. So the way we were working was not good. And we ended up in these periods that they called crunch, where everybody was working, 6-7 days a week, 12 hours a day, trying to resolve all of those defects.
Yeah, it's an intense amount of pressure, right? So, but even if it wasn't called Agile, now you're an Agile coach, right? So now you must have a much better or deeper understanding about what Agile means. Maybe you could discuss some of what those sort of best practices are and sort of give a deeper definition of how that plays out.
Yeah, so the real key, and the reason this worked so well in the game industry, right, is so the core difference for me, right? The thing I realized was Agile works really, really well when there's a lack of certainty, right? So if we're doing a project that is really clear, we've done this 100 times, we know the steps, we can estimate this really well, we know what the work is, we know how to do the work, just going through the motions over and over again, right? But video games are not like that at all, right? This is it's an adventure every time. Even a game like Madden that's been around for 20 years and you pretty much know what's happening there. But every year there's this huge pressure to go big, come up with some new feature, some new innovation that that gets people motivated to go buy the new version of the game, right?
Yeah. Well, and the game itself, in other words, the NFL game itself actually changes every year in a way that, in some cases, can be super dramatic. The rules change, the players change, the strategies change. You have to implement all of that.
Right, exactly. And stadium updates and there's all kinds of stuff, right, that has to be done.
You got to keep in the place where the Raiders play, for God's sakes.
Right. So anyway, but all of that was that uncertainty, that unpredictability about it, right, makes it really hard to do traditional project management where you want to go through this planning phase and you lay out all of the details and then you just go execute that, right? Well, what Agile says is, I know I don't have all the information, right? So I'm only going to plan what I feel pretty confident in, and then I'm going to plan again. And then I'm going to, execute and plan and execute and plan. Now, we still had to get to the same deadline, right? We still had to launch the game at the same time, but it gave us more freedom to kind of explore and accept that things were going to change along the way. Right. So that's literally what Agile is. Agile just says plan for change, and just adapt, right? Be willing to make those changes as things happen.
So are you suggesting that traditional product management would say, we have a year to do something. Here's the January plan, the February plan, the March plan, the April plan, all the way out to December. And here are the people that are going to implement it. Whereas the Agile plan would more just say, between January 1st and January 15th, we're gonna do this thing, and then we're gonna meet again, and then we're gonna figure it out. We always want to get to the end, and the end is the release of them. I'm just gonna use Madden because you talked about it. But the end goal always has to be, we're gonna release that game at the end of the year, whatever it is, right? Or the movie or whatever the project is. But in the interim, we may zig and zag across the way in ways we hadn't anticipated, and that's the planning for change that you're talking about. Do I have that right?
Yeah, so I guess an example would be, so every year there's new features, right? And at the end of one launch, right, we're just getting ready to do the next one. We have some ideas, some features you would want to do, right? We just think, these are great. And you start to develop those features for the next launch, right? The next version of the game. But in the traditional way, you would plan in detail all of those features and then, set the marching orders, go deliver those features. In an Agile world, you would say, we have some ideas, right? Let's go prototype, experiment a little bit, try these things, iterate on them, then commit, right? So then decide what the feature set is much later in development than we would have earlier.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. And if a bug in software development is just an issue that needs to get resolved, right? It's a problem. There must be sort of analogous things in every other project, right? In other words, it's not a bug, but it hasn't gone the way you expected to. It's a project fail at some level. Can you still use the same methodology, whether it is a software development plan, building a movie, or just like building a new house or a new building, right? In other words, can this work across verticals as well?
Yeah, so the difference for us in the way we did this was historically, because you had to stay on that schedule, right? Once you committed to that schedule, you had to go, right? So when you hit these defects, you basically pushed them aside and said, all right, we'll deal with that later because I have to stay on schedule. Whereas in Agile, you say, no, finish what you're working on, finish it, then go do the next thing. So instead of deferring all those defects to late in the cycle, which is what we historically had been doing, right? And that's where we would end up with, say, 50,000 defects.
Let's just fix this stuff. Yeah.
Right. So, Agile says, no, don't push it out. We even have a term for it. We call it technical debt, right? So technical debt is a known defect that we didn't deal with, right? That we put it off, right? We also know that the cost of fixing something is much lower if you fix it right away than if you wait, okay? And there's a bunch of reasons for that, but just think about it this way, right? So I'm building something, I'm coding, right? I don't know if you have any experience with coding or programming, but I'm programming something and I've got a defect in it. Think about how much easier it would be to fix that defect while you remember what you just did, right? As opposed to 3 months after I finished, now, right, you kick that back to me and go, oh, there's this little bug in there, and you go, oh, well, I don't remember what I did there or why I did it that way, or, so now you spend so much more time trying to ramp up again. And, you also may have added 10 other features on top of that code that now
impacted by that
one may break 10 other things, right? Yeah. So much better to fix it right away.
Let me give you a real life example from my own experience. When I joined Goldman Sachs in 2001, we started a process of rebuilding a portfolio trading system. And one of the things and I didn't know Agile, I just didn't know it, but I was thinking at the time, I had not heard that terminology yet. And I was thinking at the time, if we're going to build this, we're going to have to fix the problems right away, because the old system was riddled with bugs, riddled. Yeah. And I said, look, if we do this, remember, if we make it, and I didn't even know this term, technological debt, but it's a great term, right? What I said to them was, look, if we make a decision and we go down a road, coming back and fixing it doesn't mean just like going over to the correct road. Sometimes it means coming all the way back to the origin and then going down a different road. And it takes so much more time and so much more effort. And it sounds like you're saying that, actually. If you fix it right away, you can determine even if you're on the right road. But more than that, you can fix those problems. You know what I mean, though, right?
Yep.
Because if you're lost, right, and you make another wrong turn, just fixing everything along the way is really bad. And from a software development perspective, you're right. Yeah. If you have a bug on top of a bug, if you fix one of them, you may create another one that you didn't anticipate, right? The unanticipated consequences could be huge if you're not operating in an agile environment. Is that fair?
Yeah. So here's the other, kind of key aspect that's very different too.
Go ahead.
Is the goal is to have what we call working software every iteration, right? The point of that is reviewability, right? Historically, also in the traditional, projects, you would go months sometimes before anybody ever saw any of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Exactly. We've done 3 months of design. Now we've done 3 months of development, and then we show it to you, right? Agile says, no. Every 2 weeks, I'm going to show you something, right? Because you want that feedback to say, is this going the right way? I know we said we're going to go this way, but you could go, part way there, you get a month in, right? And they're looking at it going, oh, I know that's what we talked about, but now that I see it, can we go this way a little more, right? So those are healthy. Those are really healthy changes, because it means at the end you get something they like more, right? They're happy with the outcome because they got to influence it along the way. Now, this scares the hell out of most project managers, though, right? Now, I had a plan, right? I'm following my plan, and how do I stay in budget? How do I control this, right? We call it scope creep, right? You changed your mind 1 month in, and now I don't know what I'm doing or how much it's going to cost or when we're going to deliver it, right?
But just like most things, it feels like there's a two-way conversation going on here. In other words, it feels like the people that are doing the project have to adjust their mindset. But it also feels like the people that are the recipients of that project or the drivers of that project also have to change their mindset. Because in some cases, right?
Yeah.
Let's just, again, software is just an easy way to explain this, but the developers could think, I'm going to deliver in 2 weeks, but the people that are asking for the software to get developed may not care enough, but like they may not want to see it every 2 weeks. Do you feel like in your experience, when you're driving these projects or teaching people about agile project management or agile development, that there's got to be a mindset change sort of on both sides, right? I mean, they're working together, but you're right. In some cases, in the old days, it would be like,
you're nailing it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That is a key problem which I just kind of described, right? I mean, you get two sides to that, right? Either the client really wants to be agile and change their mind every week, or the team wants to be agile, and if both sides aren't on the same page and in the same mindset, and I also want to assure you, I kind of described there, I realized, the project that's gone to hell, right? Scope creep. And Agile done right, doesn't have that problem because everybody up front understands we are planning for change, right? And so there's an analogy, I guess you'd call it. Anybody who studied project management knows this term, the triple constraint, right? So scope, time, and cost, right? That these, in a triangle, if you will, right? They counterbalance each other, right? If I increase scope, it's going to take me more time, or it's going to cost more, right? Because I got to add more people, resources to the team, or whatever, right? Anyway, same thing. You say, I need more time, it's going to cost more, right? So any change to one of those three constraints potentially affects the other. Well, in traditional project management, we would have, they called fixed scope. And if you're going to change anything, it would be time and cost, right? So, but the scope gets locked in at the beginning, right? I did that plan, I know what we're doing, and I lock in the scope. That's traditional project management. In Agile, we flip that and we say, no, lock in the time and the cost, but the scope is variable, right? Meaning I can change my mind on what we're going to deliver, but when we're going to deliver it is locked, right? And how much it costs me for each of those iterations is pretty locked.
It's also locked.
Right. The variableness can come in. We can have a project that literally says, I'm iterating every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever my cycle is. And I know that the time and cost of each of those cycles, the scope gets negotiated at the beginning of each of those cycles. The variable may be how many cycles do we do, right? So again, it may be we start out saying, we know we're going to do at least 5 cycles, but until we get to there, we're not sure, is it another 5? Is it another 10? How close are we, right? So that's how you manage those projects, right? Is you say, give me a certain amount of time and budget, and then we'll be okay with changes in the scope to a point. And then you can either say, all right, we ran out of time, we ran out of money, we got as far as we can. But again, that's another piece of this, in that, it forces you to really prioritize and say, are we working on the most important thing right now, right? And that's also very agile, right?
Look, there are a lot of things that I want to ask about here. The first is, in your experience, if you're working with sort of complex or complicated organizations, right, the larger a corporation is or a company is, impacting the corporate culture or the corporate mindset can get difficult. And again, not because the people are bad, but most humans by nature just do what they're used to doing.
Yep.
How have you found this idea that, is it better to start at the CEO level? Where do you start impacting the culture of a corporation or of a company or of a project when you want to start changing the mindset and the functionality and the approach from what you call traditional to agile?
Yeah. So it can go in kind of either direction or both directions, right? So actually, it's really nice when it's going kind of in both directions,
For sure.
right? So you have people at the top who are saying, yeah, we need to be more agile, let's go get it. And you have people at the bottom saying, yeah, we need to be more agile, let's go do it. If either side is resistant to it within the organization, it's much, much harder. But I have seen it be initiated from the top and kind of pushed down right?
Yeah.
So they start doing training and telling people, we're going to be more agile, right? I've also seen it, and this is what happened at EA, right? We did it on one team. We did it on NCAA college football. We went to 2-week sprints doing Scrum when no other teams were doing that, when the project management office was still very traditional. We had this gated system there, right? So you had these phased gates you had to pass. So we were trying to do agile, kind of within an organization that was really structured. And so it was challenging. But again, what happened was, so the first year was really, really tough. We didn't know what we were doing. We were all kind of new to this practice, and we were going through the rituals and trying to figure out how to make that work. But we still had good results. I mean, we put out a really solid game that first year that got, some looks. People were like, all right, what did you guys do differently? Because you delivered more, right? More features, higher quality than you have before, right? So it got some looks. So they kind of backed off us a little bit and said, all right, keep doing what you're doing. We want to see this play out another cycle. By the end of the second cycle, we were killing it. We were rocked their world in terms of how good the game was and how many more features we got done. We really did amazing things with that game. In fact, it was I believe the highest. There's a scoring thing in the game. It's called Metacritic scores. Right. We had the highest or the greatest increase in Metacritic score from one year to the next of any game at EA. In our game where we were doing agile while the rest of the company was still not really there yet. And that helped us. So that was kind of a bottom up thing, right? We did that successfully there to the point where we got attention from the organization, and they grabbed some of us and said, all right, let's start rolling this out and get more teams doing what you guys are doing, because it's clearly working.
So not just for EA, but for any company that implements this, excuse me, at the beginning, is there this sense of fear? And I don't mean at the beginning. I want to sort of make this analogy to when you go up to a 10-meter diving board for the first time, or jump off a cliff into the water in Hawaii, where when you're at the bottom and you look up, you're like, it's not that high. And then when you get to the diving board, you just think, I think I might die if I go down. And actually, after you jump, you're still a little bit scared. But once you do it and succeed, you just want to run back up and do it again, because you can feel how amazing it is. Do you get the sense that Agile is the same, that when you start the process, traditional firms or traditional organizations feel like, I don't know, it just feels like we could jump and we could die. But once you get into that first phase, like you said at EA, where the NCA got that better, what do you call it, give me the name again? Metacritic score, that then you went into the second phase, and then they said, okay, we're still jumping off the board, and now we feel better, and now we need everybody to jump off the board and change the mindset. Was there that feeling, at least at the beginning, that maybe this is a fear?
I mean, you're always kind of taking a risk when you try something new. Sure. And, in this case, there's a lot on the line at EA. There's tons. Unbelievable
These
pressure.
Are big games and big numbers. Yeah.
Big money. Yeah. Hundreds of millions of dollars for Madden, right? Every year. You just can't blow it, right? You've got to get a good game out. And so, yes, you're stepping off that, more like cliff diving. Probably,
that's what I
right?
think. That's the first thing I thought of. Because I did this in Hawaii, and I remember when I jumped, I was like, I could die. And then I was like, I'm running right up and I'm doing it again.
Yeah. So, well, I'm scared of heights. So that analogy just terrifies me. No, we also had really, really talented people. So, and here was the other thing that was important distinction at EA, right? EA had the right culture for this, right? This was a group of really young, energetic, creative, folks that were used to being asked, right? I mean, this was one of the things, they said every year when we were gearing up for a new game, right? Don't look at other games and try to, do what somebody else has done. Do something that has never been done in games before, right? That nobody's doing in a sports franchise, video game, just, or any game, right? Give me something really new, right? So they were accustomed to that kind of creative challenge. And Agile really feeds creativity. It opens the door, and that's more the leadership side of it. So say EA, it was almost kind of a no-brainer that once we took that first jump off the cliff, these guys were going to go adrenaline rush, do it again. Let's go, right? So organizationally, they were in a much better place culturally to do that, I think. But they also had this safety net, for us on NCAA trying to do this, because we did have, a organization behind us that was not going to let us fail. Right. If it really started to go sideways, they were reining us in.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to make the NCAA or the NFL angry at me. For sure.
Well, or our customers, right?
Any customer,
people who play the game faithfully, and yeah.
No, I completely agree. Look, a lot has changed in the last year, right? In the way people work. I'm really curious what you've seen in your life with the sort of speed of change in the technology space alone, how that has sort of impacted project management and where that feeds into Agile.
Yeah. So, well, you can imagine, right? I mean, I started my IT career back in the early 90s. Okay. And technology was pretty stable. You introduced a new version of something and it stuck for years. In some cases, a lot of my peers made careers out of, they learned one programming language or one technology, and stayed with it for, 10 or 15 years doing basically the same thing. I was a little more fluid. I was in the network infrastructure group, and things changed. Every 4 or 5 years, probably you had to really go learn something new. But now, I mean, it's unbelievable. You can learn a new technology, and in 8 months, it may be completely obsolete, right?
Yeah.
So anybody in this business now, should understand that I have to constantly be learning and adapting to change. And so Agile really suits that mode, right? It's really what Agile is about, being, able to deal with change. But this year, globally, culturally, society, changed with COVID. And so, but the companies that were Agile already, really in the fabric of the company, Agile, I'm absolutely sure have had better results this year in dealing with it, right?
But they would almost have to, right? Because again, not to interrupt you, but because this whole idea of planning for change, it means that, okay, we didn't plan that everyone was going to work from home. We didn't plan that we're going to have to implement faster internet. We didn't have to plan on buying new machines for everybody, but that's okay. We iterate every 2 weeks anyway. So what are we going to do? And how are we going to fix this? And if you have that, remember, we said this earlier, if it's a mindset and if it's a mentality and you already have it, then you're used to making those types of decisions. But if you're not, if you're stuck in a fixed and sort of rigid system of decision making, you're almost going to fail by definition in comparison to people that are already thinking, what's the new change? Because it doesn't matter. Is that fair?
Yeah. Well, and, technology is solves problems, right?
Sure.
I mean, technology is rarely the business itself, right? We use technology to solve problems, provide services, that people need. And, so much of that got just stood on its ear this year, right? So companies facing, my market just completely changed. What people need is different now than it was, just 2 months ago, right? And so again, being Agile also sometimes means, just shake it up. Just completely look at it and go, yep, we were all geared to go do this year, and now we're going to go do that because there's a whole different business opportunity, or maybe it's just survival mode, right? We need to do something productive and keeps us busy, hopefully, brings in some revenue, and maybe we just have to be really creative about finding those revenue sources in this pandemic. But again, a lot of companies, have been able to do that. And I think they've been able to do that, if they're Agile and they've got an Agile mindset. And now here's another thing that I believe in a lot of this, that I have seen exampled is, it's high performing teams. Okay. So this is the other thing that if you're a really good agile leader, okay, you empower your teams. They become more capable of making decisions, more creative, more innovative. I call it fearless, right? They're fearless because they've been allowed, right, to go create, do, take risks, fail, learn from failure, right? They become fearless about doing that. So when something like this happens, right, and you're already kind of fearless, you can go to those teams and go, all right, just throw everything away that we thought we were going to do. I need ideas. Give me ideas, right? And those high performing teams that have learned to be fearless because they had a great agile leader who taught them to be fearless are going to. Oh, we lost Michael. Oh, hello.
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here.
I don't know if that was me or you, but we went on for a second there.
Yeah, that's okay. So one of the things that I did want to ask you, right, because you talked about failure and defects, the creation of defects, right? If you're going on and you said Scrum, I mean, maybe there's a time to define exactly what Scrum means, but let's just say you're going on a 2-week schedule. Do you see places where, like at the beginning, because I've seen this, right, over a year-long project, if there's only interaction like every 6 months or every 3 months, Bill failed because he didn't deliver this thing. But he didn't know he was failing because he didn't get told until 9 months into the project. You see, this gets back to this fearless thing you were talking about, right? So maybe Bill was taking a risk and he was trying to do something novel and sort of very aggressive, and nobody knew because nobody was paying any attention because it wasn't part of the process. But do you see in these agile development or sort of agile project management situations where somebody will say, something, let's try this really new or really risky type thing. And then in 2 weeks, they're just whatever the time period is, someone goes, that failed. But that person feels comfortable because they can take another risk during another cycle. And I'm also curious, at what level do you teach the necessity for just like open and almost like radical communication with people, right? Because one of the problems that we always had with development was you just didn't talk to the teams enough, right? The back and forth wasn't enough. What role does like open communication play?
Well, it's huge, right? So, and this is part of the cultural shift that happens with Agile. And I have talked with so many teams, Michael, that you're talking with the developers, right? And I'm encouraging them to be, creative or innovative. And they'll say to me, said, but, we don't know what the customer really wants. We were given this spec sheet, right? We're given some requirements, but we don't know why they're asking for those requirements, right? And so that's that complete breakdown in communication, right? Your programmer can't give you, something or delight you, exceed your expectations if they don't understand the context of the request. So, and this goes back to that kind of high performing versus, just going through the motions and delivering stuff, right? And I see this a lot, right? If you just get a requirement and you don't know the context, you don't know why, right? You're not going to put your heart and soul into delivering that, right?
No way.
But if somebody's been able to give you that context and say, oh, if we can deliver this feature, our customers are going to be able to do this with it, right? It's going to rock their world, right? Blow their socks off if they get this, right? So now I'm the one developing that feature. I've got that context, and I go, oh, they're going to be excited about this.
Right.
And what I found happens is, and again, this is part of that kind of safety thing, right? Is, and I would say this all the time, if you can improve on their request, so they've given you this requirement and you can improve on it, then take a chance and offer an improvement, right? And they may come back and go, no, you missed it. Right? I see where you were going with that, but that's not what we want. And you just got to be completely okay with that. All right, I tried, you didn't like it. That's okay. Because you also learned something about why they didn't like that, right? So, but this was, now I worked with a group in China for about 5 years, okay? So I was here in Hong Kong, working as the account manager, client services director for this company. So most of our customers were in the US or North America, the projects I was helping with, but the developers and software testers and such were all in Suzhou in China.
In there, yeah.
But these guys were so, accustomed to, you gave me requirements and I'm just going to give you what you asked for, right? Exactly. This is what I get paid to do. I'm going to give you what you asked for, nothing else, right? And I kept saying, no, improve on it. We want to delight them. We want to, really exceed their expectations. And some of these groups, it took me kind of years to get them to realize that they could, that it was okay if they embellished a little bit or suggested something to the clients. And we had much better results and much better relationships with our clients when they started getting creativity out of China.
Yeah, I mean, look, just imagine this. Imagine walking into a restaurant and having the waiter come over and say, what do you want for dinner? And you just say, now you're the client, right? And let's say the chef is the developer. If the waitress or the waiter is the project manager, you just say, give me some meat that's delicious. Like, that's never going to work. Right. If you say, give me a T-bone steak with a side of like string beans that are cooked with a little bit of a garlic sauce, and I want some potatoes that do this, and you get just that, and it's amazing. You're super happy. But if the waiter comes back and says, I spoke to the chef, and the chef said, if you add a little bit of this into it, we think it's going to be delicious, even better. And they come back and you get that, and you're like, this is sublime.
Yeah.
You need to go back to
or even better, right? They don't even tell you, and you get this little side dish,
for
right?
Free.
They say, chef saw what you were ordering and just thought this would be great with it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you think about Agile
and right. But teams don't do that. If you've got them kind of in a box and saying, stick to the plan, just do what's in the plan, you don't get that kind of, engagement level, right?
But again, that's where the chef is fearless, right?
Yes, the chef is fearless. Exactly.
I know that you love this. And that I think encompasses that Agile idea of like, I got it, I know what they want, but I'm going to do better.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. When you're coaching, when you're teaching this, what are some of the obstacles that you run up against? In other words, what is the best way to teach people about this? The best way to coach them?
Well, so actually we're gearing up to do a 2-day course for the MPC on Agile leadership. And so the approach there, my kind of methodology, if you will, I kind of start with self, right? So let's look at ourselves first and think about how we can be agile, right? I talk about servant leadership and, but you have to get yourself in the right mindset first. Then we talk about kind of the organizational structure there that, so again, not necessarily the specific day-to-day practices, but the organizational structure you need in order to support that transformation. Okay, right. But I also talk a lot about it's all about people, right? It's not about those rituals and mechanics. Right. It's really about people and understanding people and people's fear of change. And, they got a fear of heights and they're standing at the edge of that cliff like me, right? Going, no way, I'm going to jump off that thing. Right. And so you've just got to understand that and treat people like individuals and, with respect. But one of the challenges, and this is, again, kind of Asia, more so than North America, right, is part of this shift, right, is that kind of empowering thing. I talk about, servant leadership, and it's allowing people to make decisions on their own, take risks, right, and do that sort of thing. But as somebody recently pushed back at a talk I was doing on Agile leadership, they said, hey, if I'm the boss and you tell me that, I'm not going to make decisions anymore, you guys go make the decisions. Right. Still being the boss, right? Why am I paying you to be the boss or the manager if you're not making decisions, right? So, so part of my answer to that is, well, first of all, you don't tell somebody, I'm going to, let you make decisions now, right? Because that would be kind of autocratic and the opposite of what servant leadership is to begin with, right?
Correct.
So the idea is it's a negotiation with people to say, I would like you to take more control here, right? I want you to, to do this. Will you accept that responsibility, right? So, so that's part of how you get this to happen, right? Is you coax them, you work with them, you negotiate, with them, and again, like me jumping off that cliff and getting the adrenaline rush. What happens is with your people, they probably won't trust it right away. Like my guys in China, I mean, they were really hesitant to speak up and push back on requirements.
Right.
But eventually they did, and once they did, they realized this is good. This is I enjoy this more, being able to not just put my head down and do what you asked me to do, but actually think about it and ask questions about the requirements and why, right? Why are you asking for this? So yeah, it's a slow transition. You have to get people in the right mindset, and you can't just flip a switch and come in and say, I took an Agile leadership course and everything's going to change from here forward, right? That doesn't work either.
No, yeah, not at all. Look, this has been an amazing conversation. I've learned a ton. Is there a way that people can find out more about the MPC program, or that they can find out more about Eric Byron? How should they go about doing that?
Yeah, so again, we're getting ready to do a 2-day Agile leadership course through the MPC. So
Right.
So yeah, you guys can reach out to them, and we don't have a schedule yet. This is a new course we're putting together for these guys here. I'm really excited about it. Actually, I've been doing the coaching. I've done a lot of writing, and I've been putting together these materials specifically on Agile leadership. I'm going a bit beyond project management. So yeah, no, it's going to be great. Honestly, I really think it's going to be a great 2-day experience. So reach out to MPC. I know a lot of the folks who watch this have been through PMP training there, and this does fit right within the PMP's shift here. Right? They're adopting, looking at Agile too. In fact, there's an Agile certification, certified practitioner within the PMI project management certifications, and so this will help you. Right, this is all part of that process of learning within the structure and the certifications as well.
Okay, that's super. Look,
Does that answer that?
Thank you. Yeah, it does. I really want to thank you, Eric Byron, Agile coach at the Myanmar Project Management Center. Really fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for doing this.
Great. I hope to hear